Hi everyone, my name is Michael McCann, and welcome to part 6 of this Wayward Art Company tutorial on creating a character in Blender 2.77. So in part 5 we did the majority of the fur for our character. So now I'd like to do a little bit of the detail fur, so things like whiskers and eyebrows and so forth. So I'll come over to my object data, and under Vertex Groups, I'll add a new Vertex Group. And the first thing that I want to do is add some big bushy fur to the cheeks. So I'll just relabel this group Cheeks. And now I'll tab into Edit Mode and go into Face Select. And I just want to select maybe these 6 faces on each side of the head. And we'll go ahead and assign that to the vertex group. And now that we've done that, we can add a new particle system. And I'll just rename this Cheeks. And I'll set this up the same way that I did the others. Change the type to hair. And under the emission amount, I'm only going to do something small like 25 because it's such a small area on the mesh, and I will be giving it children, so it really doesn't need too many. So I want to find the vertex group Cheeks and set the material to hair. And choose interpolated under the children type. And under the children settings, I know that I want to give it a lot of end point because, as I said before, I want those cheeks to be really big and fluffy. I'm also going to take the length down to 0.7 and then take the threshold up to about 0.3, and that'll make it a little more choppy. And just as we did with the tail, I want to take that clump value up a little bit because, we discussed how hair gets longer, it sort of naturally groups itself together. So because this hair on the cheeks will be a little longer, we'll use a little bit of that clump value. And I'm going to use a little bit of random as well. I don't typically use this feature because I don't think it's too obvious in the renders, but because it's on the face, it might stand out a little more, you might notice. So just a little bit of a random value. And now I'm going to tweak the length just a little because I don't want it to be too long, but I definitely want it to be a little longer than the rest of the hair on the face. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll take the size up a little. No, that maybe looks a little too long. Really, it doesn't matter because once we're into the particle edit mode, we can shrink or grow areas that we want to just in the edit mode itself. So I won't spend too much time doing it in these settings. Instead, I'll just switch over now to the particle edit mode. And before actually editing this particle system, I'm going to keep the puff brush, and I'm going to go back to the body, the original particle system. And I'm going to just puff that out a little so that it blends in a little more with the longer hairs on the cheek. And then once we do get that blended in, then we can use the cut brush and the combing brush to give it the shape that we want. So I think I'm going to switch over maybe to my cut brush and remove some of these hairs underneath of the cheeks, because basically I want all those long fluffy hairs coming out of the side of the cheeks, but not necessarily on the bottom side, because I'm trying to keep the same general shape of the cheeks, that rounded the rounded shape. So maybe I'll switch back to the cheeks particle system, and I'll use the length brush, and I'll set it to shrink, and I'll just shrink some of those hairs. Okay, and that's kind of more what I was going for. Now that I'm looking at it, I think I'm going to puff that neck hair out a little bit as well. So I'm going to switch back to the body particle system and go to the puff brush and just make that neck look a little more fluffy. Okay, now we have big bushy cheeks. So now I want to add some whiskers. So I'll add a new particle system and just call this whiskers. And whiskers are really easy to do, and they're kind of fun. We'll just change the type to hair. And the length I'm going to keep, considerably longer than the other fur on the body. So 1.32 in my case. And the root size I'm going to set to 0.4, which is twice as thick as the other particle systems root size. And let's see, I'll set the material to hair. I do want to take these segments up a bit, which gives a little more detail to each individual hair strand. And then finally, underneath of the physics section, I want to give a little bit of Brownian value, which essentially just makes the hair look a little kinked or bent, and gives it a little bit of a random shape. Okay, something like that looks good. And then I'll take the number all the way down to 0, because we'll just be adding them in the particle edit mode. So we'll just go over to particle edit and go to the add brush, and then make sure that you select X mirror. And now as I add them on one side, they'll appear on the other as well. So I'll just start with about 5 or 6 strands on the side of the muzzle, and then also add some above the eye, because animals who have whiskers typically have them both on the muzzle and above the eyes. And it is looking a bit long, so maybe I'll just switch over to my cut brush, and I'll just go ahead and shorten it. And I still have X mirror on, so it will work. If I do one side, it will also affect the other side as well. And they're all sort of sticking, out straight in front of his head, so I want to comb them back. So now I can switch over to the comb brush. And in the right orthographic window, I can just comb them back. And then on the front orthographic, I can sort of space them out and sort of style it a little better. For this kind of work, with eyebrows and whiskers and things, I always like working in the front and the side windows together, just to make it a little more, work a little more efficiently. But so now I'm puffing it out with the puff brush. And in case I forgot to mention it before, down here you can actually select how you edit each individual strand. So, with this selection, I can just edit the ends of each hair strand, which makes the whole process a little easier to bend the shape of each individual strand. Okay, so I can just grab these individually and sort of bend some out forward and some to the side, just giving them all a little bit of a random direction. And I think that that looks okay. I'm not spending too much time on any of these particle systems right now because you won't really know what it looks like until you do a test render, which we'll probably do after the next particle system, which is going to be the eyebrows. Now, animals like this don't typically have eyebrows, but because we're going to be giving the character shape keys, you kind of need eyebrows to define human-like emotions, the expressions in the eyes. So we're just going to set this up kind of the same way that we did with the whiskers. But the difference is we're not going to give it the hair material. We're actually going to create a new material, and we're just going to call this eyebrows. Alright, so we'll just start with the diffuse shader, and we'll type Shift A and add a translucent shader. And then we'll type Shift A again and select the add shader. And now we can combine those two. And I'll just select the dark brown color for the diffuse shader. And then I can just drag that color down to the color slot in the translucent shader. And that's just a really simple material just for the eyebrows. Okay, so as I said before, we're going to be doing this pretty much the same way that we did the whiskers. So we're going to be drawing them on, and we can set up the particle system the same way, pretty much the same way that we did with the whiskers. So I'll just click Advanced. I'll take the number all the way down to 0, and then I'll select that eyebrow material. I'll take the root size to 0.3, which is kind of in between the fur root size and the whiskers. And now I'll just switch over to Particle Edit, and I'll just start adding these. So I'm just doing this in rows to give it a little bit of thickness. Once we comb it, it'll all sort of, kind of, brush and blend together. I'll make it a little thicker at the start of the eyebrow and a little more narrow as it goes out. Okay, so now we can comb them, and X mirror is still selected, so as I do this on the right side, it affects the left side as well. And I'm kind of just taking the brush and sort of fanning out the front of the eyebrows to make them look a little more natural. And we need to fix the sides so that they curve around with the form of the head. But that looks okay. I think it'll look good with the rest of the fur once we do a render. Which I suppose we should do a test render now, so that we'll know if we need to come back and make any adjustments to any of those particle systems we just added. So I'll just go into my camera view and get a bit closer to the face, since all of the particle systems we just added are on the head. Okay. Alright, so that angle looks pretty good. Okay, so there it is. I think it looks pretty good. The only problem areas I see are around the ears. They look a little patchy, but we can fix that. And then I think we'll move on to working on the materials for the eyes and some of the glossy materials for like the nose and the inside of the mouth, to give them a little more realism. So really quickly, we'll just fix these ears by tabbing into edit mode, and I'm just going to select the rim of the ear, so just these faces that make up the border of the ear. Those on the front and the ones on the back as well. And this is actually a pretty common problem with anytime I do a character like this, or really any mesh that has a particle system of hair. Anytime that there are thin parts of the mesh like this, oftentimes the hair looks a bit patchy. I'm really not quite sure why, but it just does. It might have something to do with the length too, because it's we had this particle system pretty short. But I'm just going to add a new vertex group, and I'm just going to call it ear rim. And I'll assign those faces. And now I'll create a new particle system and call this ear rim as well. And switch it to hair. Select that vertex group, ear rim. Give it interpolated under the children settings. So, I want this to be very short, probably pretty much the same length as the hair that we gave to the ears before, because we're pretty much just adding to it. And I'd like to take the end point value up, because that will make all of that hair sort of tangled together and fill in any patchy spaces, which also gives the appearance of length added to it. So might want to take that hair length down a little. And we'll also comb it out a bit so that it doesn't look too tangled or too fluffy at the end of the ear. So I'm taking it pretty low. It's 0.02 is the length, and then I'm adding some variation to the length with the children as well, and a bit of randomness. And I think that will probably look good. Of course, take the root size down to 0.2. And then we can select the hair material. And it does look a bit tangled and messy at the moment, but again, we're going to go into the particle edit mode and clean it up a little bit with the brush. So we can go ahead and do that now. Actually, before, I'm going to go back to object mode. Before I do that, I'm going to take the number up to 2000. So just pretty much double it, because I want to make sure that I fill in any of those patchy spots. And that looks pretty good. It looks pretty full, and I don't really see any spaces that look like they don't have hair. So now I'll go back to the particle edit mode. And I'll just stay with the comb brush and just pretty much just straighten it out a little as best as I can to make it look not so tangled. And the endpoints may be a little strong, so I could maybe decrease that a little bit. But basically, you're just following the curve of the ear and combing the hairs pretty much straight out. And I think I will just go ahead and lower that end point a little bit just so that it doesn't look so tangled, to something like 0.58, and that looks good. So now we can finally start working on the eyes. But one thing we need to do, if we go to our modifiers, we need to apply the array eventually, and it needs to be at the top. But you see, if we put it at the top, the eyes get a little wacky. So we need to readjust the array modifier with it above the subsurf. So on the relative offset, I'm just going to adjust the value so that that other eye looks in place. And in my case, that value is negative 1.92, and that looks pretty even. So now I can tab into edit mode, and the first thing that I want to do is press Shift D to duplicate the eyes. And now I'll press H to hide them, and we'll work on those in a bit. But I want to select this loop in the very center, the loop of triangles, and I'm just going to press G twice, which is the edge slide. And by just moving the mouse, I can adjust that so that it's a little smaller. And then I can select those faces, and I just want to extrude those back just slightly. Now I can go into the right orthographic view so that I can see a little better what I'm doing. And I'll extrude them back again, and I'll scale it up. And that opening looks a little rounded, so I'm going to just use Control R and add a loop cut and bring it forward so that it's a little more defined in detail at the end. And I'll select that center vertex and just pull it back. Okay, so that's looking okay so far. I do want to select this loop of faces here and just press SY0, which will sort of flatten out those faces. And then I can pull them back a bit. And so now we need to search for an eye texture. So I'm just going to Google and searching for eye. And then go to Images and Search Tools. And under Usage Rights, just select Labeled for Reuse with Modification. And there are a lot of options here, especially if you're willing to go into Photoshop or GIMP and do a little bit of editing. But one texture I thought was probably the best, and the one that I think is ready to use, is this one, which the site is pixabay.com. So if you go to Visit Page, you can download it here for free. And then we can take it into GIMP and do some editing. So I'll just go to File and New Image, and I'll make it 1024 by 1024. And now I'll drag in that texture that we downloaded. And I'm just going to go to Layer and then Scale Layer. And I'll take it down to be maybe 400. maybe a bit smaller than that. And that's maybe a bit too small. So we'll take it back up to maybe around 300. Okay, so it looks good. We can work with that. So I'm just going to go ahead and export that out. I will be editing this image more, but we can work with the color actually in the material itself in Blender with nodes like the RGB curves and so on. So let's go back into Blender. And we need to unwrap the UVs for these eyes. So the easiest way to do that will just be to split the eye into two parts, and we can put a seam right up the side, so it's kind of hard to see because of all of the hair and the geometry, but if you find that center loop, you can select it and then type Control E and choose Mark Seam. And now if I just select everything, I can press U and then just select Unwrap. Now if we go to the UV image editor, let's give it a new material. And we'll find that eyeball texture. Okay, so let me switch to the material view in the viewport so that I can see the placement of the UVs as I'm moving them. And I'll just select this larger piece and move it over. Okay, so I'm just going to scale it until I get the size of the iris that I like. And then I can just scale the pupil down so that it fits into the image. So I'll select the center UVs because I know that these triangles are that center of the pupil, and I'll just scale it down so that it fits, according to the model. Okay, so now I think we can apply that array modifier. Okay, so if we need to do any editing now, we need to make sure that we change our pivot point to individual origins. And what I want to do is just scale these in so that they're a little smaller, and again, it's very important that you do that with individual origins. Okay, and now I can type Alt-H to unhide that other sphere. And what we're going to do is just give this a new material, and we're just going to make it glass. And make sure that you had scaled the original eye in so that it's just a tiny bit smaller, because you don't want those faces to intersect. Okay, so now I want to do a little bit of editing with the texture on the eye, because I don't want the eyes to be so blue. And that's really easy to do, to change the eye color. Another thing that you might notice is even if I shine the light really brightly on the face, the eyes still seem a little dark. And that's something that's really easy to fix. But first we'll just go in and correct the eye color. For me personally, I think that maybe a nice green eye will look really good, because it could sort of match with a nice foresty environment scene. So I'll go for the green eyes. And the way that you do that is you just want to select the material that has the eye texture. And then between the texture and the diffuse shader, we're just going to type Shift A and go to Color, and then choose Mix RGB. So, the RGB in the Mix RGB shader or node means, red, green, and blue. So we want to select the blue, and if I were to bend this curve up, it would make them more blue. So I want to bend this curve down, which takes some of the blue away and actually changes the color to green. Okay, really easy, and that's done. So now I can adjust this lighting a bit. And so the reason these eyes look so dark is because there's actually being a shadow cast on them by that second layer that we duplicated. So, as light goes through this glass shader, it's filtering the light and essentially creating a shadow on the eye texture underneath. So we need to go to our object panel, and underneath of cycle settings we need to uncheck shadow. And now the eyes look nice and bright. Okay, so I think that we're nearing the end of this video now, because it's nearly time to start on the more advanced materials, the ones that would react to lighting, like translucent shaders and glossy shaders and so on. So let's make the light a little more dramatic, so we would see some of those effects. And I think we can start on some today. Maybe just work on the nose perhaps and the inside of the mouth. So let's maybe, to make our viewport a little faster and our test renders a little faster as well, we can go to the modifiers tab, and let's just turn off the particle systems in the viewport. So if we just click on all of these little eyes, they'll still render, but you won't be able to see them in the viewport, and that way Blender will speed up a little bit. And I'm leaving the subsurf modifier on. I'm just removing the particle systems from the viewport. Okay, and I think that will help, again, speed up the viewport, and also the hair won't obstruct our view from the new materials that we're adding. And so we'll start with the nose. And we can probably put the tongue and the nose on the same material, since the bump map texture, I think, is pretty... would pretty much be the same. I just want to find a texture for both of them that looks just kind of bumpy. So we'll put them on the same material. We'll just create a new one, and we'll call it tongue/nose. Okay, I'll just assign those faces to that material. And we can zoom in and select the tongue as well. And assign those faces, and you'll probably have a hard time seeing with the mouth closed, but later on when we get into the shape keys, we'll probably see the inside of the mouth a little better. So I'll just add a texture to that material, and then I'm just going to reopen the texture that we painted, the character texture. Okay, so now we can apply different shaders and things to this material that won't affect the rest of the body, but it will it'll be applied to just the parts that we specify. So in this case, the nose and the tongue. We're just going to add a glossy shader. And we'll just mix these two together with a mix shader. And I'm sure that you've heard a lot of talk in the CG world about physically based rendering and reflections and using the Fresnel node. So we're going to do that. Under input, we're going to find the Fresnel node, and that's going to be the factor which forces the reflection to the border of the geometry. Then I'm going to take my roughness down so that the nose looks a little more wet. 0.1 perhaps, I think looks pretty good. And so now the next step would be to add some bump maps. And as I said before, we are getting a little long in this tutorial, so I think we're going to call it quits in a minute. But first, let's just go over to CG textures, and we'll find the textures that we're going to use in the next tutorial. So in the search bar, if I do a search for skin, I get some interesting results. Most of them are a sort of a leather texture, and then there are some just other just sort of strange textures that I'm not really sure what they are. I think this one's plastic, and I kind of like it for the nose and the tongue because it's just kind of bumpy, which is essentially what we need. And the next one that I'd like to have is maybe just a leather texture or something really subtle that can work as a bump map for the skin on the pads underneath of the hands and feet. So there are a lot of them that would probably work. I think I might use this light one just because it's a little more subtle. So I'll go ahead and download that as well. And yeah, I think that will work really nicely. And this is a good stopping point. So in the next one, we'll finish up all of these materials, and then we will start on the armature. So until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.